What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Ian's Life, and welcome back to the Budget Bushplane Chinook. Today, we're getting onto the firewall backwards, getting all the engine systems installed. I want to make a quick note before we start, though. This video was recorded a long time before the intro that I'm shooting right now and the editing that I'm doing. That's not normally that apparent, but just want to give you guys a heads up. It's going to be pretty apparent in this one. Also, we lost a lot of footage on this. So there's a couple points where I talk about going to time lapse or showing something that doesn't immediately get shown. Sorry about that. We just lost some footage and we're doing the best that we can to work around it. It's not too apparent, but did want to mention it. In any case, stay tuned. Let's roll that intro. So today we're getting started on the electrical on the airplane. And I'm going to start this out by mounting some systems. We've got a bunch of stuff that has already been mounted. Things like our avionics up here, the radio, the dynon, our switch panels. So we've got some fixed items that we're working with in this area. We already know where those are, so we're going to be wiring to and from them. But there's some other stuff that needs to be mounted. And I'm going to start back here. One of the big items, in fact, you could call it kind of the heart of the electrical system, is this. This is a lithium battery. This actually came on the airplane, and it's still good, so I'm going to continue to use it. Love these things. Super lightweight, easy, powerful batteries. But we've got to get it remounted because its old mounting place no longer exists. So I like the idea of a nice short run to our heaviest thing, which is the starter motor on the engine. So we're gonna mount it real close for that. It's gonna live back here aft of the airplane. So I need to build a battery box for this, and I think I gotta do a little more study. I think we're gonna mount it to this main upright pole right here. So I have to build a box that's going to attach to that. So I'm gonna get started with that, and then we'll move on to some of the other systems that need to get mounted. That's our battery box complete. That only took entirely too long to do, but it's in here. Much like everything else, it's clecoed in place because we're going to be pulling it out to do final finish and paint. Probably. I guess I could leave this in bare aluminum if I wanted to, but that's a decision I'll make a little later. But with this in, now we can move on to the next portion of the wiring, which I don't even know what that's going to be yet, but at least I can now plan all of my wiring runs with the idea of my power source actually being in a fixed location. Last time I was working on things, I got my firewall stuff pretty well taken care of. We've got our battery here, we've got our voltage regulator, our rear relays over here, our start solenoid, all good. We also got our other big systems, our ECU bracket, the remainder of our relays. This guy actually is the ECU, but I can't put him here with the clecos. That's all done. So that leaves us on to our next piece of prep for wiring, and that's sensors. So there is two sets of sensors for an engine. Let me get a better view of this. There's two sets of sensors that go on one of these engines. There's the sensors that actually run the engine. That stuff's already here. Stuff like our throttle position sensor, our cam position sensor, etc. That's part of the engine. Its entire purpose is to go over to the ECU and run the engine. But then we need to monitor the engine. Now all of that has to do with our dynon, which I have over here. And this is kind of our pile of sensors. We've got things like manifold pressure, This one is oil pressure. There is a amp shunt for amperage. There's just a whole pile of stuff going on here, and all this also needs to be mounted because this wiring harness and the wiring harness for all of this both need to go through the firewall and go forward. So let's go ahead and start getting some of that stuff mounted. So today I got a bunch of things in and we're gonna get those installed. The first of which is this guy. This is my bulkhead connector, or half of it anyway. It's gonna take all of my electrical and pass it through the firewall. I think we're going to mount that down here so that it'll be kind of blowing off to the side of all the electronics. I need to go ahead and get a hole drilled for this. We may, actually, you know what, I don't know. I'm of two minds about it. I have to decide which side it's going on. But we'll get that figured out, get a hole made, and get this mounted, and get on to the other systems that came in today. And that's our bulkhead pass-through installed. And now I can actually show you how it's going to work because I have both halves of it. This will be our harness side connection. That'll be everything over here. So you'll be able to put that on and just click, that goes in place, everything passes through. And I positioned it so that if I roll over here, this will be kind of behind the seat, and then it'll go down to our electronic stuff and forward from there. So pretty happy with that. The next item that I'm going to work on is this, which is one of our fuel pumps. I only have one in so far. Made an oops in ordering and only ordered one, but I can just use this to position both of them and order another one in. So I got to figure out a position for this and go ahead and get this mounted on the airplane. The fuel pumps are in. I am absolutely thrilled about this. I actually forgot I had another pump, so I was able to get both of them in today rather than having to wait to order another one. We've put them symmetrical here so that the fuel can flow in. I do have some routing to figure out, shut-off valves, things like that, but they are here. I did do one oops where I dropped the tool through my fabric. Fortunately, I'm already needing to do some fabric patches, so no big deal. So with the wiring mostly done, I went ahead and started into fuel lines because that was something else that was going to have to run through here. I did have to move the fuel flow sensor down a little bit to clear this turn, but now we've got aluminum hard lines going from here to here, down and around and up and over to where we're going to get into rubber lines and get into this part of the fuel system here. A good day of work. It's still messy looking. We're in the stage of things where I do lots of work and it still looks like a gigantic mess, but that should be clearing up pretty soon as we're just about done with a lot of this. I think tomorrow I'll get back out here where there is more wiring to do and there is more fuel stuff to do. So we'll be back on that in the morning. And good morning and welcome to a weekend with me. I know I haven't been doing a whole ton of talking head stuff lately. We are kind of into the end of things. The time lapse, I don't really know how this is going to look when it comes on to video because I haven't been doing one task. I've been doing a catch-all of tasks, and that's because we're really getting down to it. I'm completing the last things, whatever they may be, that need to be done. However, I do have some really good news, and that's right behind me. The firewall forward, firewall backward, whatever you want to call it, it's pretty well done. Let me take you on a little tour. So this has been the area you've seen me focusing on, and like I said, I've kind of been jumping all over the place, just catching what needs to be done. Are we 100% done back here? No, but we're down to the point where it's just some little wrap-up stuff. We've done all the criticals. What have we done? Well, our airbox is actually finally situated. All of the wiring and plumbing for fuel and oil that runs behind it, actually not oil behind it, just fuel, that's all situated away and secured. The wiring, as I mentioned, is basically done. There's some odds and ends I have to, that I've realized at the last minute, oh, I forgot that one wire, so we'll be spending some time there, but not much. The gearbox is mostly in. I have to put some Loctite and drop the gear onto the output shaft and actually close this guy and fill it with fluid. Again, little stuff like that. Underneath here, I do have the radiator off so that I have access to this. That's just a tighten up item and it'll be on there, but our fuel line is done, secured, comes off of here and down. Our fuel pressure regulator is in. Our fuel pumps are in. Down here, more wiring. This is kind of a separated harness item. This is we've got the battery harness, and then we have, I guess you could call this chassis, fuel pumps, things like that. Everything, of course, going through and boy, do I love this thing. One single disconnect, super easy, and the whole thing comes off of there really clean. I'm not gonna try and put that back on one-handed, but love that. So this whole thing, pretty close to done. Now, our objective, by the way, is to fire the engine up this weekend. My objective. That's what I really would like to do, is see this thing run on the airplane. So we do have a lot to do for that. Now, I've already been doing some work. I've jumped up here on occasion, things like this throttle pass-through right here, and this is where the feed lines for our fuel pumps come together and go forward. Obviously, we're not done. Our electrical tray back here, nowhere's close to finished. There's a bunch of items that are going to need to go on there. The fuel lines, I'm going to change how they're done. They're currently going further forward than I'm planning. They need some attention, so I need to get all of this stuff done in order to go ahead and fire this thing up. So I'm going to go ahead and hop back onto time-lapse, and we're going to focus in here and see if we can't wrap this up to make some noise with that. Okay, so I believe we have made all of the connections for our electronics tray. Everything going up to here, all of our connections in here, everything is ready to go forward. Obviously nothing's secured yet. As a matter of fact, I'm going to have to make some very slight tweaks because I realized I made my cut ever so slightly too short, so the ECU actually needs to sit back about maybe a centimeter or so. So we'll scoot that in just a little bit just to gain that little extra bit of nice wire slack here and re-secure the tray back down, tray being the bit that holds ECU. But for now, I think it is time we go ahead and work on everything going forward. I already have all of everything that I need going to this connector here. So at this point, we're just going to go and run forward from there, and we're headed up to the switch panels and the avionics up in the front. So let's get started on that. So I've laid out most of the forward wires. Not all of this is going to come out on video really well, so we'll see what we can get of it to show you. I've just been kind of running and clustering wires together in individual bits to go where they need to go. I don't have a wiring bench set up, so I'm just doing this on the airplane rather than taking measurements and doing it off the airplane. It's not exactly the avionics proper way to do things that I used to do back when I did this professionally, but gets the job done. So this bundle is coming back to this guy that I've already got here, and all of these signals are identified via what I have, because this is everything going forward. So we've got signals, powers, grounds, everything we need all in here heading up under our console. Now if I back out and jump around to the front on the other side of the airplane, we have a couple of different subgroups coming off. We've got one coming up to our panel up top. This is engine stuff here, fuel pumps and engine power. We've got another little group that I have tucked around here. That's our side switch panel, our master start switch and master on. And then we've got the rest of this, which is some powers, grounds, and all of our gauge signals headed up to the top of here, which is just a little bit of extra length so that I can tie it into our dynon. And at every point, there's going to be some junction blocks for powers and grounds here. There's going to be some junction blocks for powers and grounds here so that I feed power to both the dynon and the radio down here. Obviously, more to do, but this should get us the vast majority of our wiring. Let me see if I can get a wide shot for you guys. This will get the vast majority of our wiring taken care of. There will be some odds and ends from here, things like push-to-talk switches and whatnot. But at this point, I'm going to rip everything back out of the airplane, take it over to that bench, and then we're going to just tie everything up and do some looming and wire chafe protection on everything. Finish that up, put it back into the airplane, and start looking at terminating everything to the various switches and places it needs to go. And here we go with all of the looming done. It's amazing how an entire afternoon of work can look like not much at all. But this represents everything forward of the electronics tray in the aft of the airplane. So we come off of the electronics tray, we have a connector here, which obviously none of the connectors exist yet. We come forward and we split off to our various things. This stuff it does offer some chafe resistance, and it's also just a pretty up item to cosmetically clean up the front of the airplane. There are some open wires, obviously, especially in the center section, but the vast majority of that is hidden underneath the console, so you're really not going to see it. There will be some exposed wiring here up at the end, which that's up at the dynon behind the instrument cluster, so not a big deal there either. Obviously, I have more work to do, so let's see about terminating this sucker and getting it in the airplane. So we've reached a huge milestone, because everything's hooked up now. Had a little bit of troubleshooting to do, but if I do this, you'll notice we have life here. This would be our avionics power, which obviously we don't have any avionics yet, but that's now hot up there. But we've also got power elsewhere. So for instance, if I do this and this, you'll hear our fuel pumps going in the back. Those are functioning. These are functioning. This is not avionics. This is engine computer power, ignition power, I should say. And those are working. We do have power down there. We're just not, there's no result if I hit them, because obviously it's not hooked up to anything. But everything is here and everything is working. Go ahead and shut that back down and drop things into the airplane, whatever. So next thing is to actually do a nut and bolt on the back of the airplane, because there's an awful lot of stuff left. Like I have the ECU out just for safety while I was doing electrical stuff. I didn't want it hooked up. So the ECU needs to go back in. And then there's an awful lot of fittings back here that are going to need attention. Either way, we are fast approaching a first startup. I just have some odds and ends to take care of before we're ready to flip the switch. So I'm going to get back to work and get those taken care of so I can make some noise. All right, we are just about ready to fire this thing up for the first time. I have done a couple of things off camera. The notable one is I've rigged up a fuel system. This is obviously just temporary. I've actually succeeded in just feeding into one of the wing spots over here where one of the wing tanks is going to feed. In through the rest of the normal fuel lines. And then we've got this, which is our return line for excess fuel to get back out of the regulator and into our temporary tank. The less visually apparent thing that I have done is leak chasing. I have fired up the pumps on this thing a couple of times now and just chased around various leaks and other little issues we have with the fuel system, which is something I was anticipating. There are way too many fittings on this thing to not have at least one of them leak. Thankfully, all of the ones that gave me trouble were none of our nice flared pieces. The flares worked great. However, you'll see this greenish sort of goop here. These are pipe threads. Those I had a little bit of leakage around and I needed to put some thread sealant on. Similarly, our fuel pressure guy, which is over there, is also a pipe thread. He needed a little bit of that same stuff. And then I had put copper crush washers on these, which these are straight metric 10 threads that actually use a crush washer to seal. I'd put copper crush washers on them and that did not work. I had, I think one of the 4, because there's 2 per pump, one of the 4 leaked and the others I had a feeling might start weeping. But the kit that came with them actually supplied these plastic washers, which I had discarded thinking metal would be better, and I was wrong. So we've swapped them back for plastic washers. They're now all sealed up. So we are just about ready to start. All right, it's the moment of truth. I can't really put this off any longer. Naturally, it is the coldest day of the year, so I'm all bundled up and looking funny here. But you know what? We're gonna run this thing anyway. The only thing I'm going to do real quick, I need to go prime the oil. I don't have an ECU in it yet. I actually have my ECU out. So no spark, no fire. I'm gonna go ahead and build up oil pressure in the engine so that everything's pre-lubed. Then we'll install this and cross our fingers and see if we can't actually make this thing start on the first go. Because that would be really cool if I could do this for video and not have to play it up and go fix a bunch of things. Let's find out if I can pull it off. So, I'm not sure. Am I in the frame over here? Kinda. I'm over in the corner. All right, I've got my oil pressure up here. Like I said earlier, I have everything unhooked, so the engine won't actually start. But, master on. Okay, I need to check and make sure that I have the oil hooked up the right direction. There's an inlet and an outlet, and if I've got it backwards, it won't actually put oil into the engine because I'm not getting any oil pressure as of yet. Now it's a week later. If you've been watching the news or were anywhere in the South, well, or the North for that matter, we just had those crazy February winter storms come through and I spent a week busy keeping my house from freezing because we're just not set up for that here in Texas. In any case, I did figure out our issue, and it was a really, really stupid one. This, and by the way, I'm going to put this up on the screen actually as I read from this, because this is something that could really bite people if they're not careful. I had a pressure gauge and I didn't start the engine without checking pressure, so I know that I was okay even though I was not building pressure. Why wasn't I building pressure? Because this, the factory service manual, led me astray. This page, which I've now got up on screen, makes, if you're referring to it, seems to make a lot of sense. You've got an oil inlet hose, an oil outlet hose, and you're looking at them going, okay, the oil goes into the engine via the inlet hose and out via the outlet hose. That would make sense, wouldn't it? Only you'd be wrong, because on this page, which shows the oil tank, you'll notice an oil inlet hose and an oil outlet hose. And what do you know? They're referring to the in and out as reference to the tank. The oil outlet is the out oil of the tank and the inlet is the return to the tank, which means the oil outlet hose feeds the engine and the oil inlet hose returns oil from the engine. And over on the, and if all you looked at was this page that shows the engine, you'd be totally backwards, and I was totally backwards. So I fought and fought and fought and got oil all over my floor and unhooked stuff and finally figured out I just needed to swap lines. In any case, enough talking. Let's see if we can get this thing to start. It's still very cold, so I may have to persuade it with a little bit of starting fluid, but let's give it a try real quick. It is also very noisy in here, so I'm gonna put these on real quick. And there you go. Starts right up, runs good. Obviously, unfortunately, just like I said in that last clip, I was hoping I would get it on the first start so I wouldn't have to do a later start for video. No, I did have to tweak things. I've messed with the idle a little bit and tweaked on it, so I knew it was running good, but it's running. This is great. So we've got way more to do, but I'm so thrilled. I can't even put it into words just how thrilled I am to have this thing here running good, no issues, no leaks. So it's time to move on to new things. Let's get on to that. And I think that's a really good place to end. Normally I pick an arbitrary place that makes somewhat sense, but you know what? Getting the engine started was a huge point in the build, and it's a great place for us to go ahead and cut things right now. So until next time, like, subscribe, and we'll see you guys on the next one.